As Tom Moore writes over at Calkins Media, Bucks County Courier, that the fans are angered with the way it all went down, but that Bryan Colangelo deserves a fair shot. And I agree that he deserves a chance to do the job. He's the guy now. We all have to accept that, whether you like the plan or not, whether you like Bryan Colangelo or not, whether you like the way it went down or not. He's the guy. And I said the other day, Tom, the stuff, the assets, the whatevers you want to call it that Sam handed Bryan, it's going to be hard to screw this up. So Bryan might end up being very well liked somewhere down the road. However, I do want to start off by saying you're a pretty fair guy, Tom, in the years that I've talked to you. Do you think the way the Sixers handled this was fair to Sam and fair to the fans?
Well, I mean, I think what the people really didn't like, perhaps most of all, was the idea that, the Sixers apparently only talked to two people. We heard like 57 people were considered or something like that. But if you're going to have a process, pardon the pun to some degree, of hiring, a guy to run your basketball operations, and you only interviewed two people, that looks sort of like it might have been a stacked deck, that it wasn't a fair fight. And I guess what the Sixers would say is, we wanted, we asked Sam to stay, we still wanted him here working with Bryan. But I think, after Jerry Colangelo came in and then, with Bryan coming next, and as I understand, Sam was not involved at all in the interviews or anything like that with Bryan, he realized it's kind of like Howie Roseman was a year ago, really. But instead of staying around, Sam, I guess, just thought, I got to leave. I had a chance, and I for 34 months or whatever it was, just under 3 years, and now I'm going to give all this up. When if all goes well, and there are a lot of ifs, Joel Embiid being the biggest one, but with the picks and the money and the the cap space and Dario Saric possibly, et cetera, there's certainly a chance the Sixers could at least start putting together a solid core and start developing and becoming, work their way up the Eastern Conference standings starting next year, maybe 30 wins if all goes well, but, kind of a progression. And I think the perception now with Bryan Colangelo is, he may be more willing to sign, I won't say a veteran free agent, but, sign a big money guy, something like that possibly.
Yeah, I guess the question that many Sixer fans, I guess, are wondering now is, okay, they got to this point where Sam basically, stripped it down. Many felt that this was going to be the off going to start taking more chances. Do you feel that is accurate, that whether Sam, Bryan, or whoever was here, that the Sixers were ready to take a step forward this offseason?
I think it's all for this plan to work, that's the whole deal. It's all, when Joel Embiid missed the second year, was missing a second year, that sort of ensured that it was going to be the third year of the tank, if you will. And everything sort of is marked toward this summer with, the cap space and the potentially 4 picks, at least 3 first-rounders. And, this is the chance. And I think the strategy would have changed, and I think Sam Hinkie wouldn't have been necessarily looking for, a potential star who's injured. Perhaps it may have been more, now I won't say win now, but accumulate more assets now, develop a core group, fill in with some veterans around them, and, kind of see what happens. That still could be the case, but I think Bryan Colangelo, I won't say is a win now guy, but is more likely perhaps to be more aggressive in the short term, maybe than Sam, who was always kind of a big picture guy, is. So, it will be interesting. Bryan's Bryan had some success, and did, had some really good moves and had some moves that didn't, work out as well. The only thing I said, he's your guy now, whether you want him or not, he's your guy. And, I thought he handled himself really well Sunday, which was not the case with Josh Harris, who did not have a good day with media at all. And I thought, just give him 4 times, Mike, 4 times Brian bailed out Josh when Josh didn't know what to say 4 times in that 36-minute press conference, which was really remarkable.
Yeah, and Tom Moore is with us, and you wrote a column, basically saying that, Brian's in a tough spot here. Is he in a tough spot because of this legion of people who supported Sam? Is he in a tough spot because of the way Josh presented this, the quote-unquote optics of it all? What makes Brian be in a tough spot, in your opinion? Because I think you're right. It's so odd that people yearn for the guy who had 47 wins over 3 years, over a guy that was a 2-time executive of the year. And as I said, it's not like Colangelo's some kind of boob. I mean, he does have a resume, but why are people so unwilling to give him the opportunity and embrace this change?
Yeah, well, I think it's just the perception and the way it was carried out, and and then Josh has the gall to say, his line about basically Brian was the guy and has nothing to do with Jerry there. People may believe something sometimes, but I mean that, I talked to 2 NBA guys around the league, and they both today couldn't believe that he had the gall to say that. So I think that's part of it. They feel like they're being, I don't know, lied to is a strong, term, but certainly misled for sure, and not being told the whole truth, to sort of put a glass half full, spin on it. So, and I think they were, they thought that Hinkie sort of set this up, and this was kind of his chance to really make or break for him. And, the perception or the idea is that if things go well, that, Brian Colangelo will take the credit for it. And I have to say, I mean, this is not a sure thing. I mean, there's some good, whether Sam stayed or Brian or whoever, there are some, some good things, some possibilities, but everything kind of has to work out. And as I said, Joel Embiid has to be healthy probably for this to really move forward, in a couple of years the way management wants.
Tom Moore's with us. Yeah, are you talking about the comment? Here's where it seems bizarre, where Josh Harris basically says, we didn't use Jerry. It's just a coincidence that his Hall of Fame dad's here and yada yada. So the way that it sounds is they hired Jerry Colangelo to be an advisor to ownership, and then didn't use the advisor's advice on hiring the president of basketball operations. That seems to be very far-fetched. Is that what you're talking about, the people around the NBA are scratching their head?
Well, yeah, I mean, and I guess, he supposedly recused himself and so on, but I guess the idea that, perhaps Jerry took the job because he wanted to get Brian in here, and, Brian really wanted the Nets job and, didn't get it at the end of February, and kind of this was kind of the last shot, I think. It just sort of doesn't smell right. There's something just a little bit, fishy seemingly about the way it goes. And as I said, Brian's been in the league for 18 years. He made some great moves drafting DeMar DeRozan and, re-signing after they traded him away, re-signing Steve Nash. And next 2 years, he was the MVP. And by the way, the coach of the year that year was Mike D'Antoni, which is very interesting, who is the Sixers associate head coach. So, there's a lot of sort of things here that are, very, very interesting to kind of delve into either at face value or look deeper and kind of wonder what the future is going to hold.
Do you feel, while you brought up D'Antoni, do you feel Brown is in any sort of trouble, or do you believe Colangelo when he says, I want to give him a chance, he deserves the chance? And he actually seemed to follow it up by saying he wanted to really pick his brain and find out more about San Antonio and how they do things.
Right. I think there's a better than 50-50 chance that Brett Brown starts the season next year as the coach. But, in Toronto, he fired Sam Mitchell a little over a year after he was the coach of the year when they got off to a slow start. He changes in Toronto. He pretty much changed everything in terms of the front office, the analytics people, staff, a lot of things. So there's going to be a lot of changes. And a part of it with Brett, too, might depend, if they bring in, he's perceived as a developing young guys pretty well, but if they, trade for some veteran guys or sign some veteran guys, that could affect things. But, I would say better than 50-50, he'll be back to start the season. But, Brian Colangelo is going to do what he thinks is best, and he did say he deserves a chance, but then later he talked about changes. It's summer of change, and he mentioned the coaches. So, it's really hard to say at this point, but, he's like Jerry. He's confident, and he believes he knows what he's doing, and he's going to he's going to make the moves that he thinks are going to make it work. I mean, when you have a job like this, you don't have an infinite amount of time to get it done. So you got to kind of hit the ground running and start making things happen right away.
Why do you think Jerry Colangelo stepped down? I mean, was this just some sort of dog and pony show?
I think because they hired Brian. Because if he stayed, and
I think that makes it look worse, doesn't it?
It was Jerry and Brian. He stepped away so Brian could run the basketball operation. I mean, unless he just took the job for Brian to get December 7th, and held it for 4 months.
Doesn't him stepping down make it look like? Doesn't it look worse that he stepped down?
I mean, you can argue that. That's I guess the other side would be, he stepped down, so it wasn't two Colangelos, and I think Sam Hinkie sort of saw the writing on the wall, with bringing another Colangelo in. I wonder if Danny Ferry was hired. I think it's possible Sam Hinkie would still be here, just because of. I think he was. The idea was two Colangelos. If there's disagreement, guess what? I'm not winning here. Everything's marginalized, so it's time to head on down the road and see what's next. I don't know that. That's just my perception of the situation.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting one because Ferry kind of came out, talked about how disappointed he was that Sam ended up walking out. How do you feel? There was the Adrian Wojnarowski article basically suggesting that there was some support for Sam and that they were basically trying to tell Sam, hey, this guy's pretty much going behind your back trying to get you out of here. And then you got Scott O'Neill basically trying to rally everybody up for Brian Colangelo. Do you feel that there was strong support for Sam, or is that being overstated?
Scott O'Neill supposedly basically stepped in for Jerry Colangelo in terms of the interviewing with Brian and so on, as I understand it. There certainly were people. The whole analytics staff, obviously, and some of the basketball staff wanted them to stay. With the changes coming, it's possible the whole analytics staff will be gone and other people will be brought in, which is what happened in Toronto. I think he certainly had supporters, but I am surprised. Like we have a poll in our online, and this is not Liberty Ballers or one of these, where it's all 20-something, 30-something guys that are all strong Hinkie
supporters. Yes.
And it's supporters, right? 81% say that this, the way his resignation left them angry at ownership, which I was really surprised, and it stayed right around 81%, since I put it up there 5 days ago, and I'm really surprised because I know that there's a strong group that are very, supportive of Sam, but I guess the other side is either quieter or just not as, not being heard as much. I don't really know how to, couch it there. But
Tom, I'm
really
in the
surprised.
I'm in the same boat. We ran a poll. 87% are not happy that Sam's no longer with the team. 87% not happy.
That's not 52% or something. That's a very strong, very significant majority. And I thought it would be maybe over 50% in ours, and you probably may have thought the same thing, but certainly not, 80-some%. That is an incredible number.
I was almost shocked because, yes, There is that little vocal. A lot of times, when someone doesn't like your work or my work, they let us know. The vocal minority out there that think we're idiots. They speak up. The people who think we do good jobs, they don't tell us we do good jobs. But is this just the vocal minority that are supportive of Sam Hinkie? They're just finding any outlet they can to say we are unhappy.
I'd say some of that because generally, if you're like, well, I'm kind of glad he left, but that's, you may not bother to vote. Whereas if you're like, this is horrible, we're screwed, nepotism, you see on Twitter all the stuff that people are saying. And,
sure.
It was very interesting too. I don't know if you saw Sunday's game when Scott O'Neill introduced Joey Crawford in the third quarter. He got pretty significantly booed, which I thought was very interesting. I think that group that knows what was going on, that he was involved in the process of hiring Brian and so on. They let it be heard, and that was also a little surprising to me that they were that it was it was pretty loud.
So do people around basketball now feel that the Sixers are in a better place?
I would say this, Mike. More traditional basketball people like Brian more than Sam, because while Sam was all analytics, Brian is into analytics, but also is more of a traditional basketball guy. He kind of has, is known for kind of both. So I think in that respect, I think like the people I talked to today were the two guys I talked to like it better now than it was a week ago. They think that the Sixers are in better hands. But, I mean, Sam was an unproven commodity, in terms of how he could move things forward. He was building assets, accumulating picks and things like that, and willing to take players who were injured or going to play overseas for a while. But now was kind of when you need to start kind of moving it forward. And it was, everyone was sort of wondering how that would go and what would happen. And, I guess now, we won't find that answer out, but
no.
It's still going to be interesting, I would say, either way. It's just, that's why I just said, Brian's your guy now. You can't change it. Sam's not coming back. Give him a shot. It may work out. It may not.
Josh Harris said you only take shortcuts to the middle. Does bringing Brian Colangelo on, to some, represents taking the shortcut to the middle, right? Isn't that why people are kind of skeptical? Because they feel he's going to try to rush them to a spot they're not ready to get to?
Perhaps that's some of it. And also, for 2.5 years, you were patient and you let, Sam Hinkie kind of operate at his speed and do his thing. And then clearly something changed and you decided not. And he also said that the league did not get involved. And a lot of people have said that the league clearly did get involved, in the whole thing about bringing Jerry Colangelo in. So that's another thing that I think people didn't like, that kind of also doesn't pass the smell test. So I think when you kind of throw it all into in a big container and shake it up, that's why people are, there's a few reasons for people to be not very happy with the whole situation.
No, not at all. It really, for a team that's already struggling in the perception, for what people believe. Most people judge, the common NBA fan judges them by wins and losses. They don't really put any credence into the victories they have off the floor, which is understandable. However, they are almost, as Sam so eloquently wrote, they're in almost historic spots for the offseason, in terms of the percentages they have for the first pick, the second pick. He laid it all out. I think a lot of people turn a blind eye to all that. And, this is a pretty interesting time for Brian to step into. It seems that ownership basically bailed on Sam. Is that how you read it as well?
Well, that's one way, to do it. Or enough people became curious. And let's be fair, Sam did not help his own cause with, not stepping up when Okafor was suspended for 2 games. We were in New York and he wouldn't talk that day. That's a time that your general manager needs to step up and speak and be accountable. Brett Brown had to answer questions for 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. It wasn't all, roses and donuts with Sam, but I think what you say is fair. And it is, I liked some of the stuff Sam did and I criticized him. I think I was fair. I was not a trust the process guy, but I also wasn't we got to get this guy out of here. We can't give him, I tried to just sort of wait and see, and it was interesting and it was different and it's longer than I thought, but here we are now, and it's to me this still is the summer, where it all it's going to happen or not this summer. This is it, whether it's Brian or Sam in charge.
Tom, 10-71 entering the final game tonight. Awful record, obviously. Did you learn anything, or was this a complete waste of a season?
Well, I mean, I would say I learned that Noel and Okafor don't seem to be a real good match together. I would learn that, Covington could be if he can play off the bench, he could be a 20-minute-a-game guy, as a shooter. And that maybe TJ McConnell could be a 16 to 18-minute-a-game backup point guard. I think Ishmael's going to want some money, and I don't know that it's going to be worth it. He's necessarily a starting point guard in the league, but McConnell's kind of a blue-collar, end-to-end, man-to-man, ball-hawking, guy, decent shooter, good ball handler. But, Jeremy Grant, some of the other guys, Rashad Holmes. I mean, the jury's still out on some of those guys. And, there's going to be a lot of new faces next year. I would say more than half of the roster will be turned over. And it'll be interesting to see who's back. A lot of these guys are going to be gone, and some of these guys, as in the first 2 years, once they are cut by the Sixers or aren't re-signed, you never see them again in the NBA. So some of these guys may not, may have to play in Europe or the NBDL or whatever. So this is a really big off-season, for the nation, and it will go a long way toward determining, if this could be a top 3 team in the conference in 3 or 4 years, or if they're going to be back to that, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th seed in the conference, good enough to make the playoffs or just miss it, but not bad enough to get a high draft pick. So
if they went to that spot next year, is that a success? If they were an 8 seed, obviously that's a huge step up. But if they were, it's almost like the perception would be this is exactly where they didn't want to be, was in that 7, 8, 9, 10 area. However, but that show major progress, and then maybe from 9, 8, 7 to jump to the next season up into that 5, 4, 5 area.
Mike, I would say it depends how they do it. If they do it with young guys and mix in a veteran here or there, and they're the 8 seed, then that's okay to me, because, and I don't think they're going to be the 8 seed. I think that's a bit of a jump. But if they do it by signing, the Al Jefferson, or a veteran guy who's not going to be a long-term answer, a guy who's going to be here for a couple of years, to me, that doesn't make sense. You need to do it with guys 27 and younger who are going to be here for years, and then if you win 30 or 32 games next year and come close to the playoffs, but develop a core group and guys develop and you define roles, et cetera, to me, I'm okay with that.
He's Tom Moore, Sixers beat writer for Calkins Media at T Moore 76ers. They closed the season tonight in Chicago. Thankfully, for many of us, I'm sure you as well, Tom, the offseason should be very interesting, and the NBA draft you can hear right here on 97.3. Thank you, Tom.
Sure, anytime, Mike.